So when it comes to the games that we run, there are people present, there is pages of notes and player characters, but equally as important is the dice. We sit there and roll to attack and to damage people and to sneak around and to find things. But my question to you all is, do dice actually dictate your game? Do you actually allow the dice to actually formulate your adventures? Do the dice impede your story, or do the dice not matter at all and you just simply roll dice because they sound cool? Fred, go ahead and tell us what you think.
I thought it was interesting that you said that the dice impede your story. And I'm like, there's no projection or bias going on there at all. So
I'm just asking a question.
I guess I guess for me, when it comes to dice, I actually think it won't happen in my lifetime, but I think Dungeons and Dragons will eventually go diceless. I think there'll wind up being a game that doesn't roll dice. And I know a few people will say, like, no, it can't happen. But no, it can happen. And I think it will happen. It just, you won't be alive when it happens. The idea behind dice and it dictating the game, for me, see, I don't fudge dice. I used to fudge dice, but I know the reasons why I used to fudge dice. And letting the dice sort of determine the outcome of the story. And that was because I was afraid of the results. I was afraid that I'd have to improvise and I'd have to go off script that I might have prepared, or off the pre-made adventure, and suddenly I've got to do something else. I was afraid that my players' characters would die, and then they wouldn't want to play at my table anymore. So once I got rid of the problems with that, like, okay, I just learned to improvise. So I'm stopped being afraid of improvising. So how do you do that? Well, I did that with story cubes and plot twist cards. I used those, and that helped. So you train yourself out of it, and then dice can determine it. Well, now I don't have to worry about character death because I won't make the decision. I'll just say to the player, do you want your character to keep playing, or you want to make a new character? Like, you make the decision. If you can't bring them back, sweet. I'll arrange something. I might put a complication in there. She's all good. She's fine. So I don't care what the results of the dice are anymore, frankly. But then again, I like to be surprised by what the dice do. Do you know what I mean? And I don't ask for dice rolls for everything the players do. If they come up with good plans, and I'm like, dude, why would you have to roll dice? That's such a solid plan. It's going to work. It's a no-brainer. Yeah, seriously. Yeah, it works. Cool. Do I need to roll dice? Nah. So, I wouldn't say that I'm either way about it. I actually like the idea of dice. And frankly, if they do make a diceless Dungeons and Dragons, I'm probably not going to be very happy.
I guess we're going to be waiting for a D&D 37th edition. Josiah, what about you? Do dice dictate the game?
So, okay. This is actually a really great question. When I saw this on the list, I smiled because I was like, this is a question that people talk about a lot. And I think that we have a lot of misconceptions about what D&D is when we sit down at the table. Because we often think of it as you have your players and you have the DM. And the DM is kind of like your referee and they're running the game and you have your players. There are three parties involved. There's the players, the DM, and the dice. The dice is the emotionless, uncaring third-party arbiter of what does and does not happen. The dice do not have plans for your character going forward. The dice don't care what spell you want to take in 2 levels. The dice don't care whether your adventure succeeds or fails. They exist. I think the dice are what makes Dungeons and Dragons so compelling, because without that, we might as well just improv, which, I mean, hey, if that's what you want to do, that's perfectly fine. But it's not a game at that point. It's us telling a story that has satisfying arcs, a beginning, middle, and end, and then we all walk away and go, wow, what an awesome story. That still happens in D&D, but when you incorporate the dice and we all go into this social agreement, this social contract that, okay, things might not happen the way you want them to or I want them to based on how these dice rolls land, you are inviting an element of chaos, which I think is what makes the game special. I think some of the best moments in D&D are when the dice don't line up with your expectations or the player's expectations, or often both. I remember one time, this was the day that I learned. I learned many lessons this day, but this was really early on in my D&D DMing career. It was the first campaign I ever DM'd. There was this plot where one of the story beats was this necromancer was trying to turn everyone in this major city into a zombie. And he was going to kill everyone and raise all the dead. Great. The players failed to stop him. So I said, I don't know. I don't want to roll 100,000 constitution saves to see who does and doesn't pass this. So I'm just going to roll a percentile. And that's the percentage of this population of 100,000 people that live in this city that turns into zombies. And everyone said, okay, great. So I rolled the percentile. 3 zeros came up. And I said, oh no. Everyone failed their save. Not a single person in the city of 100,000 humans passed their save. So I was like, everyone's a zombie. The party was in the center of this city in this like cathedral trying to do this thing. And then it suddenly went from like this heroic mission to stop the necromancer to like, shit. We have to get out of here right now. And like, what's this king situation? Like, what's happening at the castle? Like, whatever. So they went there. And like, just for the sake of flavor, I had said that the high priest was able to like create a protective barrier around like the king and like a dozen of his knights. And then there was the party. And then what ensued was the most insane combat I've ever run in my life, where we weren't using miniatures. We were using a map of the city, and I was using a Sharpie filling out which parts had been just like overrun by zombies. And it was chaos. And I remember like after that session had taken place, I just looked at everything that happened and I was like, wow, this never would have happened if the dice weren't involved, because I would have just said like, oh, like 60% of the population becomes zombies. There's a battle happening now. It wouldn't have been like a slaughter fest and run for survival. And B, like how interesting that was. And the fact that I chose to roll that openly in front of the players too, because I didn't foresee something like this happening in my naivete. It was an educational moment for me. So I love the fact that we use dice in D&D, and I think it's what makes the game as special as it is.
Absolutely. And you just mentioned rolling out in the open. That's a whole nother debate too on whether you roll out in the open or not. But we won't be getting into this one. I think it's already been covered by a billion other people. Aviad, do dice dictate the game?
Wow. So Fred and Josiah already said a lot of things that I very much agree with. So I'm going to say that in a way, very much so. I have a general outline for a plot. I have ideas, I have thoughts of how it may happen, but I let the player's choices direct it, and also the dice, which are like Josiah kind of said, they're like another chaotic player at our table that just wants the craziest things to happen, right? So yes, dice matters, and sometimes when the players come up with a crazy idea, they need that natural 20 for it to work. And sometimes the villain will attempt to escape with a teleport spell, and I genuinely don't know if the counter spell is going to hold or not. So might escape, maybe not. There was one time when the characters were in a really bad spot, and they had this cavalry NPC arrive. She was a witch character, and she had a plan, and she snuck in, and they fought this very powerful devil. And that devil just cast Power Word Kill on her. So, okay, she can counterspell that. And I rolled that die out in the open, and she died at that moment. And they knew that she tried to counterspell it, and she couldn't. I didn't know what was going to happen, and she just happened. And I love that, because it gives us the opportunity to also be very surprised at what's going to happen. And that's beautiful.
Absolutely. The dice giveth and they taketh away. When it comes to my games, I definitely started off with not caring about the dice. I would have a game set, plan in motion, And I would just throw the goofy enemies at the party would win all the time, and maybe they get like hurt here and there, but they'd always succeed and whatever else. And then I slowly started to realize, I definitely want a bit more variety there. I definitely want to see what can happen. So I started rolling for things more and more, and I started to roll for how many monsters there were, and I started rolling for their HP, and I roll out in the open, and I just started tacking on all these dice rolls. And what it ends up being is I truly get to be a participant at the table because I've got no idea what the heck's going on. And I love showing up to the table with a vague idea in mind. My players are going to maybe walk in this direction. That's all I know. And then I leave it up to the dice. I leave it up to their crazy shenanigans because players ruin everything. And it just keeps, and more importantly, dice ruin everything. But that's awesome. I'm willing to bet over the course of my career, the best stories that have ever been, I have to recount, aren't from natural 20s, but are probably from natural ones. I think natural one stories are just a lot more entertaining for everyone involved. Maybe they suck right then and there for the certain character that falls in the lava or for the person that gets cut in half or whatever else. But later on, it's an awesome story to tell. So I definitely let the dice dictate my games for sure.
Yeah, man. Like, one of the best campaigns I ever ran was a group of players who were trying to get to Celestia to find out why Paylor had like become silent or whatever, playing in the Forgotten Realms. And the way they got off the material plane was they entreated the help of a very powerful dragon who was like, I can plane shift you, but this magic is unreliable. Like, we don't know where it's going to send you, but it'll get you off the material plane. And their thought process was like, okay, well, it's easier to get between the other planes once you're off the material plane. Like, there's more portals and stuff. So sure, like, let's do it. So I rolled again openly. We brought up a huge chart that I found online of all the different planes, and we just chucked a percentile, and they ended up in the third layer of the 9 hells. Which, hey, they got off the material plane, but then that turned into a whole. This was around the time when Descent into Avernus came out. I was like, perfect. So that was where we ended the session. And the next session, I read that book and was like, yeah, cool. We're just doing this Mad Max thing now for a couple sessions. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's fine to let the dice take your campaign off the rails because you find new rails. There's always more rails. That's my personal take on the whole situation anyway.
Yeah. Oftentimes our dice send the players straight to hell, but I guess the mode of transportation varies.
So we're taking the no fun allowed train down to hell now. Yeah, no fun allowed, down to hell. They're going to pull out your fingernails, put you in lava, all sorts of horrible things. Josiah, there was something that you mentioned and said, and I've heard people say this before, and I always like, I don't understand why people say that. And that is that if you play Dungeons and Dragons and you don't roll dice, it's not really a game, you're just improvising now. Do you know? And I was thinking, there are role play games that do really well and they don't roll dice. And they're not just improvising.
That's true.
And the other thing I was like, so why is it that people think, because I love the surprise of the dice and I love rolling dice. I sell a lot of dice, by the way. But the reality is, I'm like, when we were kids, we didn't need to roll dice to play Cowboys and Indians or, be in the future and be Flash Gordon. I'm old, guys, okay? I know you guys don't play any of that sort of thing. But we didn't have to roll dice. We just used our imagination the way we went. And there were some guidelines around that. We were playing army soldiers or whatever, stuff like that. So I'm thinking, a game can actually be a game, and a Dungeons and Dragons game can be a game, and it doesn't have to roll dice. It might just look a little different to what we're used to. So
I think that's true. I do think that there is definitely some truth there. I think when it comes to D&D specifically, I think the reason a lot of people have that sentiment is because there aren't a lot of other systems in place in Dungeons and Dragons. Like, it's like the dice are everything. Like, you skill check, you roll a dice, right? Attack roll, you roll a dice, whatever. Whereas there are definitely games that exist where you're not rolling dice, but they often have other systems in place to make up for that, right? I do think that at the end of the day, because we're improving no matter what, it's like when you're kids and stuff and you're playing games, I don't know what it is, but it's so much easier to just be like, yeah, like I'm an action hero. This stick is my sword, whatever. Like you can just get into it. You don't care. I think that mechanics is one of the biggest things that facilitates adults playing pretend, because then it doesn't seem silly. It's not like, oh, there are no rules, you can just do whatever you want. It's like that's still true, but because you have this dice rolling element to it, or whatever mechanic you're using, it makes it seem like, oh no, like there are rules. This is a game for adults. Like I'm an adult. I'm not just running around in my backyard, you know. I don't know what it is, but something happens to our brains once you pass the age of like 12, where it's like, yeah, I need a mechanic now. I need there to be rules to have fun. I need my fun to have rules now.
So you're throwing shade at the whole LARP community. Got it.
Yeah. If you LARP, no, I'm just kidding. But I guess that's a really good point, is that you have people who do LARP and stuff like that, right? So like there clearly are people who are still able to have fun doing that. I just like, I don't know what it is. So many of us need the dice. It's a crutch. Destroy all dice.
As someone who LARPs, some LARPs actually have rules and systems in place. So if we want to make an alchemy potion, we may need to find some in-game resources and, you know, role play us making it. And then we have something that can heal hit points. We still have those. And I feel like the role of systems is it's a great thing to help people agree on how things should go. So we're all in this together. As a kid, it's easier to get into it, but as an adult, we have different ideas from people in the room. And yes, ending is important for improv in any game we play in, but at the same time, there are some ideas that might spark into mind, like, is this how it should go? And I feel like systems help with that. They help consolidate all the ideas into one reality, or not reality, but, imaginary world we accept.
I think that you just nailed that right on the head. Is like, it helps us agree on an outcome rather than just saying what we think the outcome should be. I agree with Aviad completely, 100%.
Alrighty, rocks fall, you all die. So there we go.
I don't agree with that outcome.
Well, it says it right there in my rules. Alrighty. So yeah, I'm curious, what do you all think? Go ahead and tell us down below in the comments. Do dice dictate the game? Do you need those mechanics in place, or are you okay with just winging it? Go ahead and tell us, because we would love to hear it.